Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. I'm Harold Mock. I'm the Director of Georgia College's Leadership Programs, and I'm a faculty member in the History Department. I want to say thank you for spending time with us this evening. And in a few moments, we're going to hear from Dr. Amena Anderson from West Virginia University. You'll find what she has to say insightful. You'll find it engaging. And we're especially glad that Dr. Anderson has made the trip down from West Virginia to spend time with us in Milledgeville today and tomorrow. But before we get started, I want to just say a few words about leadership and what it means for us to think about and to study and to practice leadership. That's Dr. Anderson's specialty, and she'll be sharing some ideas with us tonight. It's a sort of special thing about leadership that there's always something more to learn. There's always a new way to grow. So think about that as she shares her ideas with us this evening. I also, on that note, want to encourage you to think about other presenters, other speakers, other lessons you might like to learn about leadership. And we're always happy to do our best to set that up for you. You can connect with us online at gcsu.edu/leadership or engage us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Lead Creatively. But with that said, thank you all for being here, and I'll call on Emma Perry, who will introduce Dr. Anderson.
Good evening. Dr. Amena O. Anderson serves as Assistant Director of West Virginia University Advance and is Assistant Professor of Practice. A former Director of Multicultural Affairs, Campus Retention Specialist, and Statewide Director of the WV Achievement Project and Advanced Placement Initiative, she is a seasoned educational leader with extensive experience in both public and private higher education. In her past roles as an educational administrator, Dr. Anderson taught and developed curriculum for courses in the first-year college experience, speech and intercultural communication, and professional and cross-cultural studies. As Assistant Director of WVU Advance, Dr. Anderson leads an interdisciplinary team of faculty whose empirically grounded work promotes equitable policies and practices in both academic and non-academic units across the university. Additionally, she teaches both undergraduate and graduate level leadership courses and is the faculty advisor of the Milan Puskar Leadership Scholars Program. In 2017, drawing on findings from her research on men faculty engagement and gender equity work, Dr. Anderson co-designed a professional development course for aspiring academic change agents for equity in STEM and beyond. Now in its fourth iteration at WVU, the course was adopted by 3 major universities during the 2018-2019 academic year, following a summer intensive Train the Trainer at WVU in 2018. An alumnus of the National Educational Policy Fellowship Program, Dr. Anderson holds a Bachelor of Arts from Fairmont State College, where she majored in English and minored in journalism, a Master of Arts in Educational Leadership Studies, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Education with a concentration in higher education policy and leadership from West Virginia University. Please welcome Dr. Amena O. Anderson.
Thank you. Oh, I have this wonderful mic. I feel like Oprah because I don't have to hold the mic. First, thank you all so much. Emma, let me tell you, Emma and Amelia, where are you? So both Emma and Amelia are really sort of part of a group of students who are responsible for me being here today. In 2018, we had a wonderful time in Strasbourg, France. And I was there as a visiting lecturer, and they were part of one of my talks, I had some friends fly in, we did a couple of things. But we had a really good time together, and I think that even beyond the talk that we did formally, we had great time fellowshipping and learning about each other and that kind of thing. And so I was so excited to get a call from Dr. Mock, who said, Dr. Anderson, I don't know what you did with my students, but they came back to Georgia College and they were like, you gotta bring Dr. Anderson to campus. That was over a year ago. And we started making plans for me to come and visit with you. But Emma and Amelia, it feels so good to know that you all thought so highly of me and that you invited me to come. And I really appreciate you all, and I appreciate the good time that we had. And I hope that I don't disappoint today, okay? So I want to thank you. Dr. Mock, it has just been a joy working with you to come. It's been over the course of a year, but we get on the phone and we have these great conversations, and I feel like we sort of connect, and we're like, yeah, I think that too. So we've had some really wonderful conversations. To the leadership here at Georgia College, I appreciate you for coming. And to all the students who came out tonight, I tried to make my rounds and shake hands with just about everybody. If I missed you, I apologize, but hopefully we'll get an opportunity to interact some more today. But I'm just feeling really good about being here. Now, I will concede that I was up at 4:30 this morning in Morgantown, West Virginia, because our major airport is in Pittsburgh. So that takes me about an hour and 20 minutes to drive there, park, get the plane, come here. And then I had this wonderful drive that was reminiscent of my time at West Virginia Wesleyan College in Buchanan, because Wesleyan, much like Georgia College, once you got off of the major highway, oh, you had a good drive, a good opportunity to meditate, take in all the foliage. And so I was feeling a lot like I was headed back to West Virginia Wesleyan College. So I want to tell you a little bit about me, and then we'll get into some other things, but I always find it important to kind of know who you've come out to listen to, and I encourage you to take some notes along the way, not so much about me, but when I get to the part, I'll let you know things that you might want to jot down. So interestingly, like Dr. Mock and some of my other colleagues here, my career in higher education started out in administration. So for 7 years, I was Director of Multicultural Affairs and Coordinator of Multicultural Student Recruitment at West Virginia Wesleyan College, which is a United Methodist affiliated school, private, very small, about half the size, maybe a quarter of the size of students that you have here. Interestingly, I was sharing with some people at one table, when I went to undergraduate school, I went believing that I would be a lawyer. And in fact, I applied to law school and decided that, this is what I wanted to do. I was accepted. I went to West Virginia University's orientation for law school, and I saw students sleeping in the hallways in the law school, and they were like, that's normal, that's what you do. Well, at that time, I happened to be a mom, and my son, who will be 30 this year, I couldn't imagine how I would do law school with a kid and sleeping in the hallway. And I was like, I don't think this is for me. So I went back and spoke to a couple of my mentors, one of whom was the president of Fairmont State, the late Robert J. Dillman, who was actually one of my homeboys. He was from Brooklyn, New York. I'm from Queens, New York originally. And Dr. Dillman and I had this really wonderful relationship. He said to me, I think you should go into higher ed. I think that's a very good fit for you. I think you'd make a dynamic higher education leader. And so he encouraged me, and I did my master's in higher education administration, subsequently my doctorate many years later. But that's sort of, with his encouragement, the prodding of some other people who had known me through college, I ended up getting into higher ed. But as I said, I came in as an administrator, as a practitioner. So very many of you who are involved in leadership, that is where my career began. So it's sort of interesting. I wouldn't say full circle, but at least part of the circle has come back around, because in my newest position as of January 1st, I am an assistant professor of practice, which ultimately means that I am a practitioner and a scholar. So I practice leadership as an administrator, but I also study it very closely. So this is where you meet me. I started out teaching assistant professor, lots of leadership classes, teaching, and so now the area that is near and dear to my heart that Emma mentioned in her introduction of me has to do with a particular type of leadership that is social justice-oriented leadership, and I'm going to talk to you all some more about that today. One of the things, how many of you are seniors who are planning to go to graduate school? Okay, good. How many of you are in graduate school? Anybody in graduate school here? Okay, that's okay. One of the things that happens, and this happened for me as a budding academic, was developing my academic identity, kind of figuring out who I am as an academic. And I remember in my graduate classes, as information was presented to me, I always had questions. Always. The teacher presents something, yeah, but why is that true? That doesn't even sound right to me. I was a challenger, is what I do. And I was trying to figure out, over the course of time, and particularly when I got into my doc program, why was it that everybody else, for the most part, just absorbed whatever they said, but my hand stayed in the sky. I'm that person that you probably would be like, would she just shut up so we can move on and the class can be over, right? But what I discovered was that I was a developing critical scholar. I was always questioning what was being presented to me as fact and knowledge, and I wanted to have more information about what was, how they came to the conclusions that were drawn. So I started to develop that academic identity, and then of course it was further cultivated when I got into my doctoral program. So then, you know, as a faculty member, if you were in my class, one of the first things I would tell you is, I am less interested in any of the answers you think you have, and I'm more interested in the quality of your questions, the degree to which you ask questions that probe and take us deeper. Have any of your professors said that to you? Oh, this is the Socratic method. I believe in this dialectical exchange, that we get to the truth by questioning constantly. Whatever things we think are true and factual, let's probe and go deeper, right? So a lot of times that's very frustrating because we have managed to prepare a generation of students who often just want to know, are you going to post that on eCampus? Can you just tell us the answer? We don't want to have this exchange, but when you come into my classroom, it's not going to be like that. We're going to talk dialogue and question the information that is presented. Question things even about leadership. So one of the things that happened for me, some of you may choose to go on to do Ph.Ds or EDDs and this kind of thing, but I developed some research interest, and my research interests were really born out of lived experience. Remember I talked to you about my role as an administrator and starting out as the director of multicultural affairs and that kind of thing. So I had particular experiences that shaped and formed me. And then when I was ready to do graduate work, a doctoral level work, where you are expected, who knows the difference between the goals of a master's program and the goals of a doctoral program? Anybody want to take a stab at it? No, because this is not that kind of format. You don't have a mic like this, it won't sound as good. The difference is, when we pursue a master's degree, generally speaking, we're specializing, right? We're specializing, it's a specialist degree. And so we're becoming more, we are fine-tuning ourselves even more. This is the goal of a master's degree, specialized knowledge, right? When you get into a doctoral program, you are now expected to make a contribution to a particular field of interest, right? So not only knowing what's happening in that particular field, but also contributing to the knowledge base, okay? Finding gaps in the knowledge that exists and trying to fill those gaps is the work that you will find the doctoral students are doing in most programs, in all programs to some extent. So they ask you about, what are your research questions? What are you interested in? And all I could draw on was my lived experiences. So I know everybody thought I was Irish. Raise your hand if you saw my red hair and my freckles, and you were like, look at this Irish girl, 5'10", well, 6'2", probably today. Raise your, because everybody's colorblind, right? Yeah. How many of you are colorblind? Oh, so we can get rid of that right away, because I'm not Irish. And I don't even look Irish, do I? I don't even sound Irish. Do I? No. But I'm a black woman. Did you guess? How many of you guessed otherwise? Yeah, I'm black. Bickety black. Okay? So when I talk to you all about my role at West Virginia Wesleyan College as an administrator, West Virginia Wesleyan College is a predominantly white school in Buchanan, West Virginia, where I moved with my son, who is now 29, he'll be 30 in September. He's like, "Mom, quit pushing me." I'm like, "I'm just saying, you're getting old." So we were 2 of 10 black people in the whole town, I promise you. 2 of 10. And I'm working at the college, and there are some things that go on at the institution, and they have to do with, race and all kinds of discriminatory stuff. Not so much at that institution, but sometimes in the area, And what I became intrigued with were my colleagues, my white colleagues, who would get involved in social justice work, and those who wouldn't. And I was really intrigued by those who wouldn't and those who would, and why there was the difference. What was the difference between people who were members of dominant groups and they felt compelled to get involved in social justice work, and people who, just felt like, I'm good, right? So that became a research question for me. And then in the context in which I worked in academia, I became very interested in what that meant very specifically in the academic community, because I had colleagues who would be forerunners in terms of trying to get things off the ground and make things happen. And my research started to focus on that. So you heard Emma mention that my research on men faculty who engaged in gender equity work in STEM was very interesting. I interviewed a large number of primarily white men who are senior faculty and leaders in STEM fields who had purposely engaged in work to improve opportunities for women who go into STEM. Because what we discovered is there were some gross inequities. And so my research sort of got me thinking about not just these men, but also other people from dominant groups and how they were supporting efforts that were moving us toward inclusion and equity. Okay, so that's a little bit about who I am. So I'm kind of giving you, a little background there. What I ended up doing is looking at my findings, and I had a mentor who said to me, how do we get more people from dominant groups involved in social justice work? How do we get academics to really think beyond just what they do in their specific disciplines, but how they can make sure that the climate at their institutions, in their academic units, is inviting to people who come in, who may be women, who may be LGBTQ, who may be Black, Latinx, the whole thing. How do we get them involved? And so I said, well, I think they need a class. I think they need some sort of development. And so I got into this idea of change agent identity development work, and that is another area of my research that's really important to me. So today, I was thinking a lot about this audience because I switched. Last week I was sitting at a table, researchers were talking about all the stuff you don't want to hear about, these numbers that came out for how efficacy is happening, and you don't want to hear that, so let's switch gears. I'm talking to students, but what happened for me, if I think about the context in which I work, most of my students in leadership studies at West Virginia University are white men. I have women in the class, but the majority of my rosters are white men from Appalachia, who are coming in. Very many are business majors, really nice guys. They just want to learn leadership, and they just want it like that guy, John Maxwell, all those big leadership gurus. They want it straight like that. Just tell us what to do, how to take charge, how to make people do what we want them to do, get where we want to be. Okay, not with Dr. Anderson. We're going to do something a little bit different. So they come in, and I'm really interested in how can I impact their lives so that when they get into industry, when they show up at these big corporations, they have a sensitivity to matters of equity and justice within their organizations. They will become the leaders that they aspire to be, but I want them to be the kind of leaders who are also sensitive to, who care about, and who are willing to make a difference in spaces where they have power and authority. So this is my personal hidden agenda. But they kind of know it right away, off the bat, and they're looking at me like, oh, here she goes. But for the most part, I get pretty good feedback. So today, as I've done in very many instances, I thought about you all, and I met a lot of you all, and I hear a lot of the fields that you're going into, and I want you all to do some thinking with me about these ideas I'm sharing with you. And I want to ask you this question. Am I doing it wrong? Sorry. Oh, it worked. You have to do it like 10 times. Okay.
There's like a presentation versus like a clicking there too.
Oh, I didn't have it on. Sorry. Okay. So, who knows what this is a picture of? Anybody remember this incident? If you do, raise your hand. You don't have to speak out loud. I see one person. Anybody else remember? So quite a few of you remember you were in high school. I was counting back because I'm old. I'm like, 4 or 5 years. You remember what this was about? Yeah? So anybody know her name? Yeah, her name is Bree Newsome. That was a close-up of Bree. She's taking down the Confederate flag in South Carolina. Anybody know why? What inspired this action? Anyone remember the name Dylan Roof? Domestic terrorist who went into Emmanuel AME Church for Bible study. During Bible study, took a seat with the people gathered, and then opened fire and killed 9 people, slaughtered them. Do you remember that? It was devastating to all of us in this country and outside of this country. And so we mourned this act of terrorism collectively as a society, as Americans. And one of the things that became an annoyance or thorn in the side of very many people, especially people in the African American community, was the fact that South Carolina still, on their official grounds, had the Confederate flag waving high, even as the bodies were still warm from this attack. And so although there were calls to take the flag down, Nikki Haley, who's the governor at the time, was saying that, she agrees it should come down, but there had to be all this talk and negotiation. And people were just fed up and didn't want to see it and were frustrated, in lots of pain. And so one day you turn on the news and you see Bree. Her name is Bree Newsome. Write that name down, Bree Newsome, BREENEWSOME. You see, we don't know her name at the time, you see this young African-American woman with braids hoisting up the pole and dismantling the Confederate flag on South Carolina state grounds. And boy, the exuberance that many of us felt that flag had come down. What do you see in this picture? If you had to tell a story about this picture, what might you say? What's happening here now? Is she coming down off the pole? People are waiting, she's up there. Who do you see waiting at the bottom? See the officials? Yeah, what officials do you see? You see any police? You see police? What else? Who else you see? If you had to guess, if I was giving out money, I should have bought some of my goodies. We have like cups and mugs and t-shirts. What would you say? What do you see? You see anybody else? Say it louder. Maintenance? Yeah, we gotta get this girl off the pole, right? That's what it appears. So this is some of the scenery that's captured. I've messed up by showing you that. Bree gets arrested. She comes down, she surrenders the flag, she makes sure that she tells the officers and the officials that she's not going to desecrate the flag, but it's gonna come down. So we see Bree get arrested, then all of a sudden, we see this guy. Remember this guy? Doesn't he look official? How many of you thought he probably worked there, was probably trying to help get her off the pole? Yeah, his name is James Tyson. Write James's name down. James Tyson. He looks kind of official. I thought, when I was watching the news, James was a grounds person who was going to help get her off the pole some kind of way. They called on him. And then, when I saw this, I'm like, hold up, who's this guy? Both Bree and James are getting arrested because Bree and James did this together. And backing them were a group of white environmentalists who were equally frustrated that this flag had not come down. They were out in California and they were like, this is ridiculous. We got to get that flag down. We got to figure out if we can identify some activists in the area. James and Bree were from North Carolina, who have some experience climbing, or any of you all climb where you got to spot people and stuff? Anybody here into that? Oh, they're into that in West Virginia. We're the mountaineers, you know. So, yeah. In their network of environmentalists, Bree says, oh, I'll do it. I've never hoisted a pole before, but I'm happy to do it if somebody shows me how. James knows all about getting up and down the poles and climbing. So do you know that they came to town days in advance and trained on how to get her up that pole, so how to take the flag down and how to get back? So he was actually spotting her. But strategically, he decided he would wear clothing that would cause him to look official to buy time. Because as you look at the pictures, did you see the officers, while she's on the pole, coming to get James? No, they were making the same assumptions we were, don't you think? Oh yeah, they were. They thought, oh, he's a maintenance guy, you know, who called her, he's standing here. Well, actually, that was all part of the strategy, that he would be a deflection and get her time enough to get the pole that he could help her down. That's their mug shot. When you get time, look up Bree Newsome, Newsome, N-E-W-S-O-M-E, and James Tyson. Read their story, read their interviews. You'll see lots of video of them talking about this particular incident. You'll see a video where James talks about the idea that no one knew who he was. Even when people remember this piece of history, nobody talks about James Tyson. When I show the picture of Bree, people remember that. They even created imagery of her, a black Wonder Woman taking down the flag. So people, even if you don't know her name, you remember that, oh yeah, that black girl with the braids, she hoisted herself up the pole, took the flag down. That was incredible. That was wonderful. Nobody's talking about James, except Dr. Anderson. And why am I talking about James? Anybody want to take a guess? A white guy doing what? Louder. Standing up for social justice, playing his part. And James said in one of his interviews, I was never supposed to be center on this. I was there as a support. I know that in this moment of history, we needed someone from the African American community, a woman, someone they could be proud of to do this work. Organizationally, we understood that. And so we fortified a force that could help this happen. And I will tell you, some of you who are African American may be too young to remember, not me and you, Monique. This is my best friend in first grade. I haven't seen her since what grade? Eighth? I haven't seen her since 8th grade, and she heard I was speaking here today and drove from Savannah, Georgia, to come here. Can you believe this? Give her a round of applause. We go way back. So we remember, but some of you may not remember. This is a provocative and important story, particularly when we talk about the important role of all of us in social justice work. I'm going to talk some more about some ideas around positionality. Some of you may be familiar with this term, some of you may not, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. But as I give the rest of the talk, I want you to think deeply about James and Bree and the symbolism behind this activism. And in my role as a professor, as a scholar activist, I talk a lot about James because the majority of the students I serve look like James. And the majority of the students I serve ask me often, Dr. Anderson, what could we do though? Like, how could we help the cause? And I'm happy to lift up people like James and this story to help them understand that there are positions we play. And this was brilliant. How many of you play chess? That was pretty good, right? So my talk is about consciousness, capacity, and courage, the critical components of social justice leadership. Consciousness, capacity, and courage. Write that down. I tell young people all the time, don't go to talks and not write stuff down. Walk away being able to say, I learned something. I know I'm saying something meaningful today. When you think about consciousness, I love alliteration. For all my English majors, I love it. Every time I can work it in, I do. I'm talking about liberatory consciousness. Dr. Barbara Love talks about developing liberatory consciousness, and I'll talk some more about that. I'm talking about key capacities for social justice leadership. And I'm talking about a very critical form of courage that we'll get into some more. I just mentioned Dr. Love, and I want to read this, but my eyesight is pretty bad. Can anybody read that for me? I don't like my glasses that much. Let me see. I can read it. Oh, I can if I stand here. All members of society play a role in keeping a disequal system in place, whether the system works to their benefit or to their disadvantage. Through the socialization process, every member of society learns the attitudes, the language, behaviors, and skills that are necessary to function effectively in the existing society. This socialization prepares individuals to play roles of dominant or subordinate in systems of oppression. The socialization process of society works to ensure that each person learns what they need to know to behave in ways that contribute to the maintenance and perpetuation of the existing system, independent of their beliefs in its fairness or efficacy. Whew, that's a lot. I don't know if we can get them that passage. I should have prepared it and had it printed out for you, but it's a good one to meditate on sometimes. When we think about this system that we're a part of, the things that we like and dislike and this kind of thing, just understand that we are all complicit in it. Whether we intend to be or not, there are ways in which we all help to reinforce it. So if that's true, what must also be true? Might it be true that we all have to help fix it? Yes? No? Maybe? Maybe. Okay. So when I talk about consciousness, I talked about liberatory consciousness, I start with this idea of liberation. What is that about? Liberatory ideas, like, some of y'all took Latin or whatever. You know that word, liberation's in there. Liberty, and justice for all. What's another word for liberty? Freedom. I got a 14-year-old. That's all she talks about. Freedom. Freedom, Mom. You don't give me no freedom. No, I'm a dictator. I'm not joking. I give her some freedom. It's just not enough. No, it's never enough. Liberation. A consciousness that is concerned with liberation, freedom, everyone's right to exist, to be free, to live lives that are full and meaningful, right? So to have a liberatory consciousness is one where you become very uncomfortable when you find that there are people who are oppressed who don't have freedom, people who are suffering. A liberatory consciousness cannot just coexist with that perception of suffering, right? So that consciousness will move you to action. That's what I'm talking about. So being aware has to do with being aware of injustices and inequities that exist and not pretending that just because things may be good for you, things are good for everybody else. Just having that awareness. And that if you are a citizen of this world, you may have a responsibility to somehow try to make a difference. Can't do everything, but there are things that you can do. So that awareness. The other thing, talk a lot about this in my leadership classes, is your identity, right? So I started out telling you that I was Irish. I'm joking around and stuff, but you know, I'm African American. How do I come to know that? Well, I actually recently changed that identity to Black American, and you know what changed that for me? An African student who said to me, "Why do you call yourself African American? You're not African. We don't see you as African. We see you as Black." I was doing some research, collecting data from Black men on WVU's campus, and when he said that to me, I was in my second year of doc school, tears came to my eyes because I had so clung to this identity as an African American woman. But you do know Africa is a whole continent. I mean, a whole continent with tons of countries. So where he was coming from, he wasn't intending to insult me, but he was saying, I'm Ghanaian. He's Libyan. He's Kenyan. What do you mean African American? Like, that's just everything. You just want to be everything? You know. So it made me think deeply about, wow, then what am I? What am I? Because I'm clearly not white. And I don't know how to just say I'm just American, because that's not enough, because that ain't how you experience America in this body. I'm Black American. Black American. So what does that mean? I have a particular history that I share with other people who are the descendants of enslaved Africans who were brought to this country, and we have a very particular history. And even as I think about Georgia, we have a very particular history with this country, with our white brothers and sisters in this country. We have this link, and much of who we are as a people is tied to the lived experience of being Black in America. And it's quite profound when I think about Black history and the things that these individuals were able to accomplish and overcome. And I find a lot of pride in that identity because it embraces all of who I am. It embraces this idea that we don't all, as Black Americans or any people, all look alike, but we have a very specific reason why Black Americans look different. So I look at our history, I look at our accomplishments, and I say, you know what? I'm very proud to be Black American. I'm very proud of the history that has given birth to us. We're the creators of hip hop. We're from New York. We love it, right? Ah, hey, Queens. Not just from New York. Queens. She's from Hollis. Run DMC. I'm from LL Cool J's neighborhood. Okay, y'all don't want to hear all that. We're having fun. You got to laugh some. You got to integrate some laughter. Okay, all of us have this incredible work to do. So consciousness, knowing who you are. But here's this thing. How many of you have interacted with the concept of positionality? Any of your professors talking about positionality? I know they are. I know you read Dr. Adrian Kazar, Positionality and Leadership. You a leader? What's your positionality? that about? Somebody. What do you think it sounds like? Oh, Amena, you are not lecturing today. Positionality. So positionality is a little different from just knowing your identity, what your parents told you you are. You remember Tiger? See, y'all are so young. Monique, you remember Tiger Woods when he came out and he called himself Cabalinasian? Anybody else remember that? They asked Tiger, you know, everybody's like, he's the new black kid playing golf. He's killing it. How many of you saw Tiger and thought, ooh, this black kid's killing golf? No? Your parents? You don't even remember. Y'all so young. We're so old. I gotta find new references. But when Tiger came out, Tiger has a black dad and a Thai mom. And so even though when society saw him, they saw a young black male who's killing golf like Jordan's killing basketball, they said, oh, Fuzzy Zeller, old golfer, white guy, says, oh, I guess we're having fried chicken and collard greens at the U.S. Open. Ooh, people were upset. Racist comment. Hell, Tiger probably never had fried chicken and collard greens because his mom is Thai and he probably never had that. But when they asked what's his name? Tiger. When they asked Tiger about his racial identity, he said, I identify as Cabalinasian. Cabala, what the hell? Cabala, what? Tiger, come on. Caucasian, black, Asian, Cabalinasian. He made up his own identity thing. That was Tiger. That was personal. You know, he could do whatever he wants. But when the world saw him, they saw black man, which is interesting because it speaks to this theory. I'm going to talk to you a lot about theory. I know that stuff gets boring. There's this theory by this sociologist, some of you may know who he is, I think it's Cooley, who talks about the looking glass self, right? And he says to us that when we cultivate identity isn't just who we say we are, who our parents tell us we are. It is also who people see when they see us. So if every time I show up looking like a black woman who's 6'2", the world's going to respond to me in part as a black woman at 6'2", whether or not I'm Irish. Do you get it? So what will happen, according to Cooley, is it Cooley? I think it's Cooley, C-O-L-L-E-Y. What he's saying is that part of what happens with us is that we start to develop part of our identity based on how people respond to us. How many of you have ever been mistaken for something you're not? Yeah, happens all the time. Some of us have hidden identities and, you know, it's not obvious to people, and they'll assume things about us, right? Well, when people make those assumptions, then we start to develop a part of our identity that responds to those assumptions. Okay, I'm not going to go too much more into that, but that's that piece. Now, positionality, this goes a little bit deeper. So it's knowing who you are, it's knowing how people see you in the world, but positionality pays attention to your relationship to power in society, okay? Your relationship to power. How close are you to the people that hold the most power in our society? How close are you? What is your proximity to power? How close are you to people in the margins? You heard the term marginalization or marginalized groups. People who are not the central focus, right? So where are you in society? Are you near the margins or are you closer to power, right? And how do I mean that? Who are the most powerful people in society? Are the most powerful people the majority? Yes? Are the most powerful people in society the majority of the people? See, y'all like, that's a trick question. What's the difference between being part of the dominant group and part of the majority? Oh, we should be I'm sorry, Dr. Mock, I feel like teaching. I feel like an old Baptist teacher. It's, you know, that's what we say. Leave it alone. Okay. Positionality is having a sense of who you are in the world, your proximity to power. Most of us, you heard the term intersectionality, we have multiple identities, right? Some of us have marginalized identities. Some of us have privileged identities. Some of us have both. So you can be white, a male, and gay. Well, as a white person and a male, you have two, what? Dominant identities. As a white male who is gay, you have a one of your identities is marginalized. Do you understand? As a black woman, they say, I have two marginalized identities. As a black woman with a Ph.D., identity as well. Do you get that? So in terms of who we are, we're more complex than what you may see on the surface, correct? So oftentimes when we think about our positionality, we consider all of the different identities that they have and where they place us in society, okay? Okay, so knowing your positionality is part of that consciousness, capacity, and social justice. Oh boy, I can't read that one, so I'm gonna have to come down here with you all. You were smiling at me, you seem friendly. Can I stand next to you? What's your name?
Cameron.
Cameron, thank you, Cameron, because I can't read from there. Whew, what does it mean to have capacity in social justice leadership? Capacity to concede that you have blind spots. Oh my God, I don't hear anything else about developing cultural competence. Let me tell you something. You will never have cultural competence, nor will I. I screw up quite often. What I have instead is cultural humility. Write that down. Cultural humility. I concede that I have some blind spots. I don't know it all. The capacity to care and connect, to acknowledge and empathize. When somebody who's been marginalized, if a woman comes to you and tells you, as a man says to you, look, that guy in the office, he is making comments that are just so sexist and I'm sick of it. Don't be like, oh, why are you being so sensitive? You know, da-da-da. Acknowledge, right? Empathize with what that must feel like to be a competent person who's trying to do her job, but consistently sexualized, okay? Don't be dismissive. Capacity to abandon your comfort zone. Man, listen, it's good to be comfortable. Oh, I flew here? Comfortable. They called me for comfortable. I got up, comfortable. Because I'm so tall, my knees are always in the back of the seat. I don't want to give that up. Comfortable? Comfortable's good. We're all comfortable. Isn't it comfortable? Doesn't some topics just make you uncomfortable? Just like, oh God, hurry up with that stuff about race. Oh my God, please stop talking about the LGBTQ. I'm so uncomfortable. You have to be willing to abandon your comfort zone. If you are a member of a dominant group, and it's not just race, I was thinking about this thing that happened to me. If you're ambulatory, what does that mean? What does it mean to be ambulatory? Somebody knows. I'm doing it right now. Huh? Able to walk. People who are ambulatory are part of the dominant group, right? So if you are ambulatory, you're part of that dominant group. And when I was an undergraduate, any of you all ever park illegally? I'm sure you don't. I used to all the time to get to the ad building. Wait, don't get that on video. And one day I was really frustrated because I was coming to the class I'm always late for, where I always park illegally, and they had the whole area blocked off. And I'm like, oh, this is ridiculous. What are they doing? Da, da, da. And when I finally got in the building and I made it up to the floor, the third floor of the administration building, where my favorite professor was teaching, I'm like, what's going on? I couldn't get up here. That's what made me late. Da, 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 da. They said, oh, they're installing an elevator. And all the time I've been in the building, you think I ever paid attention to the fact that that building didn't have an elevator? Which meant that people who could not walk couldn't get to that third floor. Why did I not notice that there was no elevator in that building? Because I'm mean, I'm insensitive, I'm a bad person. No, because I'm privileged. I'm ambulatory. I ain't thinking about people who can't walk. I'm thinking about my way to park, go through that back exit, get right up. Do you see what I'm saying? This is what happens. oftentimes, when we think about how does this idea of privilege work. It's not because you're a bad person, it's because you never really had to think about it. My daughter comes in, these are not the chips I like. These are not the chips you like. Girl, you better be happy you got some chips. Because I'm always asking the question, where's the Kroger brand? You grabbing all this stuff like you have a job. You need to look at how much the Kroger brand is, and we'll see. And we've discovered that the Kroger brand is not bad at all. And you can save a few dollars, okay? Anyway, how did I get off on that? Talking about privilege and the things that we are accustomed to, right? So this is part of that process. So understanding that your comfort zone, to do social justice leadership work, you got to be willing to abandon it. Withstand critique. Oh, that's hard. Oh, I can't tell you about an incident that just happened on my campus where someone who is a social justice change agent and has been doing incredible work was criticized for a decision she had made, and in all the good that she had done, it seemed as if there became this hyper-focus on the wrong thing, the one thing that she did wrong. And to her credit, she withstood the critique, and she made important changes that now have people feeling much better. I'm going to share something with you that my father shared with me one day. Some man had me upset. Some boyfriend, he ain't worth nothing anyway. But what happened, I'm crying hysterically, and my father said to me, so if you're crying like this, there's probably some truth in that feedback. Daddy, what do you mean? How could there be truth? But in fact, there was. Some of the critique that I had gotten was not constructive, but it was helpful. And when I sat with it and I cried through it, and I acknowledged that there were things that were said that were true, I needed to work through it. Now, I always ask my students, do you want constructive feedback or constructive criticism? They always choose feedback. They think that's like some difference. It's just the way the language sounds, right? Oh, we'll take the constructive feedback. Just remember, when you get constructive criticism, that's great, but you won't always get it. And just because the criticism isn't constructive doesn't mean that you don't need to sit with it and to parse it out to see if there's truth in it. So the ability to withstand critique, to commit and continue, which is what that social justice change agent did, who I just told you about, and then to mobilize others. So you doing good alone at this table will never be enough to do social justice leadership. You've got to mobilize and figure out, how do I engage other people in this work? Courage, and this is my last slide. I know you're happy because I go on and on. Courage in social justice leadership. The courage to break away from the pack. I was at a conference, the International Leadership Association conference in Belgium. Did you go, Dr. Mock? I was there, and I was at, you know how we do the round tables? And there was this young white sister, and she came to me, she said, God, I want to do this work, but I don't have any support. You know, I try to talk to my family about some of this stuff that I don't like, and I just feel horrible, and I can't get any support, and it's so hard because it's so much easier to stay in that comfort zone. But I know I need to break away and make a difference and just find my people. So that takes a lot of courage. You know, that goes back to the idea of comfort, fighting back, right? Boy, that's tough. You know, it's so much easier sometimes to let stuff go, but to fight back. And part of when I encourage you to fight back is when you occupy space where you have considerable power, okay? It's one thing if you're vulnerable. If you're someone who could lose a job or whatever the case is, or lose an opportunity, you might rethink that, but always be willing to fight back. Ooh, see that bad word? I wouldn't put it all the way up here, but let me just tell you, you have to have the courage to do that F word, because you're going to do it in social justice work. I don't care how great you are. I don't care how you're going to mess up somebody's pronouns. I did. That's going to happen. And you're still an agent of change. You're still fighting back. But the thing that you have to do is understand that you got to find your way back. You got to stay the course. This isn't work for suckers. Social justice leadership is not work for people who are easily offended. This is work for people who are willing to roll up their sleeves and, like I said, concede blind spots and say, listen, I'm here. This matters to me. One final thing, I'll just mention this to you. I'm very excited about a guest that we're going to have at WVU. Maybe you'll bring her to Georgia College sometime. She is Joan Trumpor Mulholland, to say it like that, Mulholland, I think is how you say it. She is a white woman. If you look her up, Joan Trumpor Mulholland, she was a freedom rider. If you look her up, how many of you have Amazon Prime? You're in college. You're like, what? Oh, you have it. Okay. There is a film out called An Ordinary Hero. An Ordinary Hero. She's a white woman from the Deep South with very conservative parents. And Joan, who is now in her 80s, I think she's 83 or 4, she was a freedom rider. She rode into the Deep South. She was arrested. She's the white woman you see sitting at the lunch counter in North Carolina who's getting food doused in her and this kind of thing. She's coming to our campus, so excited to have her. She is also the first white member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Yeah. And I'm intrigued by her. Her son, Loki, who just joined the Mega Psi Phi, and he's a white guy. His dad, anyway, I don't know. You have a Megas here?
Yeah, well, not.
Okay. Well, anyway, long story short. Loki said to me in preparing for his mom's visit, whatever you do, don't call my mother an ally. She will bite your head off. I'm like, well, what the hell? That was the whole thing of my talk. I just don't call her ally. Joan doesn't perceive herself as an ally. She's something like everybody else trying to make this world a better place. I'm a warrior for social justice. I don't have to be a particular color. This affects us all. So her perspective is one that made me sort of go back to this construct of allyship and think more deeply about it and what it means, you know? And the idea that she, for her, sees herself as someone, anyone, who is committed to social justice and fairness and equity for all. And that title perturbs her. So I'm not going to call her ally, but I am going to ask her to talk and elaborate on that. Okay, I'm done. I went too long, I'm sure.
So let's thank Dr. Anderson again for her comments. We have maybe around 5 minutes for some questions, and I can help to bring a microphone to you. But questions that you may have, follow-up questions based on Dr. Anderson's talk or things you might like to have her insights on?
Yes.
Okay, so at the beginning you mentioned that, you know, when you first got into academia, you were really curious about why certain people got involved in social justice and why others didn't. Mm-hmm. In your opinion, why do you think certain people are choosing not to get involved in social justice? Do you think it's because they don't want to get out of their comfort zone, or because some of these things that you talked about were holding them back? Or do you think that there's just like something ingrained in people that they're going to be more willing to get involved in social justice? Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think there are people who care and people who don't. There are people who care and act, and there are people who care and don't act. Okay? And I think it has a lot to do with sort of just where they are in the trajectory of their lives, what they feel moved to do. What my research findings suggest is that often activism may be triggered by a particular event. Okay? So, for example, in the position I left most recently as teaching assistant professor of leadership studies, at my going away dinner, my boss said, I just wanted to tell you how much having you on staff was so enlightening for me, because I know when we were traveling to different places or restaurants, I would see the treatment that you would get that was different from us. And there was one incident that happened that I remembered in West Palm Beach, but there was a couple of others, I didn't even realize it because I'm almost like used to it now. And I've developed sort of a response to like, this is that bull, but I don't say anything and I keep wearing my mask, right? But I think there are incidents when people may be triggered, there's a critical incident that happens, that is also what the literature says, where now they feel moved to do something. You see this quite a lot with people who may have had really regressive views on LGBTQ issues, and then they have a child who is gay or trans, and now they feel differently. So that is maybe attached to their own identity, right? So there are different reasons why people get involved. Then you have people like Joan Trump or Mulholland who are just warriors for justice. Her story started out in Sunday school. She says she couldn't understand back then why they were treating black folks so bad, because everything they read in the Bible, it wasn't lining up for her. And she was challenging her Sunday school teacher. Like, if that's true, why can't they drink out of our water fountain, right? That was the impetus behind her activism, a very simple thing. So I guess it depends on what the triggers are for people. That could be one reason. Anybody else? Yes.
I was curious that you said you had a son when you were doing your master's program, and I was just curious about how would you recommend someone in that position to keep going and to stay with getting your master's, even though you have the trouble of raising and taking care of a child at the same time?
So that's a very good question. I mean, you know, my son was my motivation in very many ways to, when I felt indecisive, I knew the kind of mother I wanted to be, and I wanted him to be able to look at me and, you know, feel good about who his mom was. So I think that now it's very different because he's so much older. Like, we had the best time. I was just out with him in Seattle. But I do think that you find the supports that you have, and you ask people, and people will usually be willing when you're doing positive stuff. You know, when people see you're trying to do your best and do different things. I mean, I have found lots of help. You were talking about help, getting a lot of help at Georgia College. He was reflecting on that. And I was an activist. I went to Hampton University for 3 years, did most of my undergraduate work at Hampton University, and then after I had my son, I transferred to the college in West Virginia, Fairmont State. But I had a lot of support, and I'll tell you, I mentioned Dr. Dillman, the president at the time, who's now deceased. Dr. Dillman, I was a student activist at Fairmont State. I would meet with him and bring the baby. Like, he would be in the office with Dr. Dillman. Like, I just remember people making that space for me to do what I was doing and being supportive. So you give me a warm, don't make me cry. You'll find support. It's good. But yeah, you look for the people who support you. I have found, and I am supportive of people who are trying to do the right thing. When I see you trying to do the right thing, I want to help as much as I can. So if you are a parent and you're trying to do school and that kind of thing, you know, reach out. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes I didn't like to ask for help. Yeah, it'll work out for you.
Thank you.
Or whomever. I didn't know if it was you or
We maybe have time for one more question.
Yes. Cameron.
Yes.
Okay.
I was just curious about how you begin the conversation of positionality with people who maybe not recognize it, and how you can suss out your position in proximity to power.
Yeah. Well, so everybody has it, positionality. It's just a matter of unpacking it and talking about what it means. So if I'm positioned this way, what does it mean? I'll tell you, let me take a quick example. We had one of the deans of one of our colleges who was in the course that I developed for faculty and leaders, who we were having this discussion about the way in which student evaluations, in terms of the research, this is just a proven fact, are very unfair to faculty of color. okay? And so he started out in the course saying, well, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just the way it is. It's one of those metrics. This is what you have to do. And after we got him a couple of classes in, he looked around at his own positionality and said, well, damn, I'm the one who actually makes that decision, so I could change it. And they have changed it. It no longer holds the weight that it once held. He had to do an examination because sometimes the things that we're looking to change, we think other people have something to do with it, and you may be the person who has the power to simply make a decision. You may have enough influence to actually be able to convince people to think about other possibilities. Things are the way they are because we said they were going to be that way. So if somebody just said it and we all agreed, then somebody could say something different, and we could rock with that. Yeah, let's rock with that. Thank you, guys.
The Inspire Leadership Series is brought to you by Georgia College Leadership Programs. Join the conversation with us at Lead Creatively on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or on Facebook at Georgia College Leadership Programs. This video was produced by Bobcat Studios, Georgia College's award-winning, student-led media production company.